My guest today is a world expert on emotion research, a professor at the University of Amsterdam, author of 2 books, and the mind behind the EASI theory.
For a long time it was thought that happiness was always good for creativity and negative emotions were always bad, until some colleagues actually from the University of Amsterdam figured out it's quite a bit more nuanced. Creativity, that's a pretty big research field where positive emotions like happiness have been linked with more flexible thinking, whereas negative emotional states have been linked with...
Emotions tend to be downplayed, especially in the Western workplace. Yet, they serve a major evolutionary and behavioral function.
Emotions should respond in functional ways to situational demands. And there's lots of ways that this can go well. And then pretty much every emotion can be functional, depending on the situation, but it can also go terribly wrong.
Would you say it is important that we strive for always feeling happy at work, that it has to be a happy place?
It makes me laugh a little bit. I mean, it's hard to say that...
Professor Dr. Gerben Van Kleef. Welcome to the NeurOlympics podcast, brought to you by BrainsFirst, a company that helps you make better talent decisions, powered by neuroscience. I'm Lucy, I'm the host of the NeurOlympics podcast, and I myself have a background in psychology and applied neuroscience. But a very warm welcome to you, Gerben. So nice to host you today on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. And Gerben, I'm curious, what standing do emotions have in the Western workplace?
I think it's shifting a little bit, or has been shifting. I think if you would have asked that question 30 years ago, many people would have frowned upon hearing the word emotion. And I think there would have been a lot of emphasis on detachment, let's say, what was considered professional, being rational, if you will, unemotional. Yeah. And I think there's still a lot of emphasis on that, but I think there's also a bit more... I think there's some emancipation has happened. I think there's some bit of a little bit of an awareness that emotions can also have a purpose.
Okay, what do you think? Where's this coming from? Is it just how time is evolving, and maybe because we speak about mental health a bit more, and it's becoming a bit more psychological, the workplace, or where do you think this shift?
Yeah, it's hard to say. I can only speculate, but there has definitely also been a shift, for example, in politics. And there's been a shift, I think, more generally in how people think about well-being and how people think about social relationships. There's a lot of focus on social safety. I guess more just a bigger focus, more attention to feelings in general. And I think feelings are more accepted. They're allowed to be there. And it's, I think, maybe... today more legitimate to say, oh, this doesn't make me feel well. And this would then actually be considered an argument for, oh, maybe something needs to change in this place. Whereas maybe 30 or 50 years ago, that would have been discounted as, who cares about your feelings?
Yeah, I think you're right. Like, it's something, at least I notice for myself right now entering the workplace, that there is some focus for you to speak out or how you're feeling, how you're being. And in your work, or basically based on your work, you suggest that emotions are more than a feeling that happens inside of us, right? It's, I think you say something between us, more like a language, social signals that serve as an information between interactions. Can you take us a little bit into your EASI theory and also explain how emotions can serve as a data point?
Yes, I'd be happy to. So EASI stands for Emotions as Social Information. And so that's exactly what I think emotions are. Once they get expressed, which happens through the face, obviously, but also in the way we formulate our sentences. It happens in the way we use our voice, through body postures. And nowadays, increasingly also through more symbolic expressions like emoticons and those kinds of things in the online world. Yeah. And so there are many ways in which people express their emotions, and those expressions indeed become data points in the minds of other people. So we witness those emotional expressions, and we can use them to we can use them deliberately to inform our understanding of those other people or the situation that we're in, our relationship with them. We can also sometimes be affected by those emotions at an emotional level. People have probably heard of this phenomenon of emotional contagion, right? Where emotions spread between people. If one person is angry, the other person gets angry, or the same with happiness or sadness. So those are all ways in which emotions can become data points, let's say, that take on a life of their own in the minds of others.
And how reliable in that sense would you say are emotions? Because if we take like the example, I don't know, I come to the office and I'm quite angry at a colleague. Could be that the colleague actually did something I didn't really like, that made me angry, or it's something that happens inside of me. Maybe I stood up with the wrong foot and just didn't have enough sleep. How would you say how reliable are
that's a great question. There are several ways in which the emotions we show may not correspond to the emotions we feel. That's one source of bias or noise, perhaps, in the signal. And what you're referring to is more a situation where the emotions I'm showing are the emotions I'm feeling, but those emotions have nothing to do with the situation at hand. And there's been a distinction in the literature between incidental emotions and integral emotions.
Okay.
So me getting annoyed by the traffic on the way to work and therefore being frustrated or angry, whatever, when I get into my first meeting of the day, that will be an incidental emotion from the point of view of the people in the meeting. They might notice that I'm aggravated, and they may or may not attribute that to the meeting, but that would be misattribution because it would be due to the taxi that just cut me off on the way to work, for example. And when it comes to integral or supposedly integral emotions, there's also a possibility for people to exaggerate their emotions, fake their emotions, downplay their emotions.
True.
For all sorts of expectations or strategic intent, right? So you may feel very sad but not show it because your workplace doesn't allow those kinds of emotions. Or you may up-regulate your anger because you think you're going to get something done by it, even though you privately feel pretty okay. So there's many ways in which our emotions can indeed become less reliable in the sense that you were thinking of, in terms of being, let's say, data points that really say something about the situation.
And would you then say it's especially important to encourage this open, safety and psychologically safe environment where you feel like you can show your emotions so that it becomes a bit more valid or more real, instead of maybe a manipulation technique of showing anger or that we just have to communicate well between each other?
I think emphasizing or creating more openness or psychological safety could reduce noise on one side of the spectrum. So I think maybe in some cases people would now downplay their emotions or hide them because they would feel that it would not be appropriate to show them in that work context. And then through greater psychological safety or openness norms, let's say, people might be more likely to show what they're actually feeling. I'm not sure if those norms would address the problem of exaggerating emotions. They might actually perhaps even exacerbate that problem, because if we all start to say, oh, emotions are the best thing ever, we need to constantly show our emotions, maybe we're actually encouraging people to strategically misrepresent emotions
and use them in a way. I get that. So if we link it maybe to this concept that I feel like is in the mouths of a lot of people nowadays, emotional intelligence, how would you define emotionally intelligent behavior in the workplace?
So emotional intelligence consists of a number of different dimensions. One dimension that's really crucial to what we're talking about is emotional perception. So being able to accurately perceive the emotions of others. Other elements are emotional understanding, knowledge about what causes emotions and how they unfold and develop. There's an element of emotional usage, understanding how you can use your emotions to support your work, for example. understanding which emotions benefit certain types of tasks or performance and which emotions undermine certain kinds of task performance. And then there's an element of management or regulation, regulating your own emotions, and in some cases also regulating the emotions of others.
Yeah.
And I think all 4 ingredients are really terribly important for proper functioning in the workplace, especially when it concerns other people. If you're dealing with other people, I mean, if you're only dealing with, let's say, products or computers or those kinds of things, then it's less important, I suppose. But when it's more social, emotions are super important, and therefore emotional intelligence is important.
Yeah, I completely agree, because they evoke a feeling in us and they stir us in certain directions, depending on how we interpret the emotion of the other also. And would you say, I mean, I feel like we also nowadays speak a lot about the happy workplace. There's, for example, also roles created like a chief happiness officer, I think is a thing nowadays in companies. Would you say it is important that we strive for always feeling happy at work, that it has to be a happy place?
It makes me laugh a little bit. I mean, it's hard to say that. I mean, it would be strange to say I'm against happiness, right? I do think, I mean, I would wish for everybody to be working at a place that makes them happy.
Yeah.
So in that sense, yes, I fully agree. But there's a real risk that situation gets created where not being happy is unnormative, and which could lead people to repress any unhappy feelings.
Yeah.
And I would say, based on my work and others, those non-happy feelings are actually super diagnostic and important. And you shouldn't repress them. You should actually engage with them.
Okay.
Because otherwise problems will never get solved. So if there's a problem in the workplace that makes you feel unhappy, but you feel, the norm nowadays is to be happy all the time, so I'll just paste on a smile, pretend like nothing's wrong.
Yeah.
And pretend my way through the work day. I don't think that's going to be very sustainable. I don't think people will actually be happy. They may look happy, but they may not be happy, and problems don't get solved.
Yeah. I completely agree, because if we speak about these other emotions, like, for example, anger or fear, discomfort, sadness, that we tend to see as negative emotions, would you even put that, how do you say, that label on them that they are negative? Or would you, in that case, then say they are functional or important?
Yeah, that's a great point. I've been guilty of using that positive negative language a lot, like I think pretty much everybody in the emotions realm has, but I've done it with great and growing reluctancy. And I to a point where I recently, actually, together with a co-author, wrote a paper about how we should stop doing this.
Oh,
we should
wow.
stop. Yeah, because I really don't think that it's a very, from a scientific viewpoint, it's not a defendable position to say some emotions are positive, others are negative. It really depends on your criterion. Yeah. And as you were hinting at, I think a lot of negative emotions can be very functional, and positive emotions can even be dysfunctional. But negative emotions can also be dysfunctional. It really depends on the situation.
Yeah, that's true. And it also, like, I have to think about also the psychological phenomenon that when we think of stress and performance, that I think intuitively a lot of people think you perform your best when you're when everything is kind of fine and you feel super non-stressed. But we see it's actually happening at moderate stress. So a little bit of discomfort, a little bit getting you maybe out of your comfort zone, can be in that sense linked to performance beneficial. Yeah. But when I think of emotions, I can just speak for me personally. When I feel anger coming up or sadness, it's also like activating me in a way, like, hey, I want to get out of this emotion. I have to maybe change my perspective or get active at my workplace to solve a certain situation that I'm not comfortable with. So I think these emotions also activate us in a way, while when I feel happy, which is super nice, but then you mostly want to stay in that place. So I also see it as activator or that can move you in a sense.
Yeah, definitely. There's also research in sports, for example, that talks about optimal zones of feeling. I'm not sure which feelings exactly they're talking about, but typically arousal, I think, is one way that they look at this, which is an emotional or affective aspect, I would say.
Yeah.
Basically pointing to, as you were saying, also curvilinear types of patterns, whereas the total absence of arousal or activation is not very helpful if you are to perform some kind of sports. But being overly aroused is also probably not very helpful because it may, make you lose track of things to do.
Yeah.
And I think the same is true for many work contexts as well, and for many emotions, presumably, as well. And also at the interpersonal level, actually. A former postdoc of mine, together with me and another colleague, did some work looking at emotional expressions of customer service workers who would show either sadness or happiness about some product being available or not available, and then they would provide an alternative. And then we would look at how customers or participants would respond to those emotional expressions. And we also varied the intensity of those emotional expressions. So there was either no emotional expression, or there was mild happiness or sadness, or there was intense happiness or sadness. And across those studies, we found fairly robust patterns suggesting that more extreme emotional expressions were not very helpful in that particular customer service context, because they were perceived as less authentic, less appropriate. Some mild dosage of sadness was okay, a mild dosage of happiness was okay, but over-the-top happiness or sadness were deemed inappropriate.
Oh, also interesting that it went both ways.
Yeah.
Like for happiness and sadness.
Exactly.
That it was about the intensity, actually.
Yeah.
That can then seem inauthentic, or so I could believe. But that's interesting. I feel like a friend of mine works in customer service. And she tells me she sometimes has this urge to show like stronger emotions, maybe as a protection, because you also don't know the person you're talking to, or to kind of explicitly bring across some enthusiasm, for example, or other things. But it's interesting to hear that might not come across as very appropriate in that sense.
Yeah, I think it depends on the context and the settings that we looked at. I think the general customer setting is like that. It's a low intensity context.
Okay.
Like you go to a store to find some product. The product is not available. They have an alternative. I mean, I think in a normally regulated person that wouldn't stir tremendous emotions, neither positive nor negative, but maybe some mild emotions. Maybe there's some disappointment that you came there, you traveled half an hour to find that the thing is not there. It can be frustrating, of course.
True.
But not to the point that you would start, breaking things.
Yeah.
At least a normal person wouldn't. And so also, for the customer service worker, extreme emotions would probably also not be fitting.
Yeah.
But there are circumstances where maybe more extreme emotions would be called for.
Yeah.
And then showing only mild emotions could perhaps be seen as inappropriate, because it would suggest that you don't take the situation seriously enough, that you're underappreciating the gravity of it or the importance of it for another person.
Yeah. So it does depend on the context.
I would say so, yeah.
In many situations, yeah. And I'm, of course, also interested in how emotions affect cognition. I think you've done a bit of research on that, especially, if I'm not mistaken, comparing anger and happiness as two emotions. But how would you say in general, could you share some insights with us that you have gained over the years, how emotions can affect cognitive processes?
Yeah, I think it's useful to make a distinction between different levels of analysis. So the classic approach to this is looking at how people's own experienced emotions affect their own cognitions. And that is not my primary expertise, but I'm aware of that literature. At the interpersonal level, which is a more recent development, the question could be, how do one person's emotional expressions affect another person's cognitive inferences about what's going on in the situation, let's say, which is part of the EASI theory, for example.
Yeah.
So on that intrapersonal level, which is not my primary expertise, some things that people have shown, for example, are links between different kinds of emotions and different aspects of performance. For example, creativity.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big research field where positive emotions like happiness have been linked with more flexible thinking, flexible cognition.
Yeah.
So they would use tasks, for example, like asking, is a potato a vegetable or is a camel a vehicle? And people who are in a positive state of mind or have experienced positive emotions would be more likely to say, yes, a camel is a vehicle or a potato is a vegetable.
But
and
like
people
outside of the box.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, more flexible thinking. They would see more connections between things that other people wouldn't see. Whereas negative emotional states have been linked with especially high arousal, high activation negative states like anger, sometimes maybe fear, have been linked with greater persistence in problem solving or thinking. So people could be creative in different ways depending on the emotions that they feel through different processes. If you're more angry, you will maybe generate more ideas to solve a problem, but your ideas will be narrower within the scope of the ideas will be narrower.
Yeah.
And when you're in a happy mood, maybe you will be less persistent, but you will generate more a richer repertoire of ideas.
Interesting. So maybe with anger, you want to come to the solution more quickly to also get out of the feeling. I wonder. But that's
it could be. Yeah, that's. I'm actually not sure if that has been studied. Motive to regulate your own emotions.
Yeah.
But it might play a role. Yeah.
But I find it interesting that because it shows also that, cognition in a sense is not is objective the right word? Maybe that consistent as we might think. So it...
Yeah, it's not a singular thing. There's multiple criteria, multiple processes. And this is just an example. Flexibility versus persistence in creativity comes to mind because for a long time it was thought that happiness was always good for creativity and negative emotions were always bad.
Yeah.
Until some colleagues actually from the University of Amsterdam figured out it's quite a bit more nuanced.
More behind it.
Yeah.
And it's also... it's super interesting because do you also know something about, for example, how it affects our focus or our concentration? Like I could also imagine it depends a bit on the intensity. Like if you're in an extreme emotional state, that might affect you differently than in a mild emotional state. But are there some insights you...
Yeah, I think there's some evidence that certain negative emotions like fear, for example, or there's definitely theorizing about this, but I think also some evidence that it would narrow your focus of attention, which from an evolutionary point of view would make a lot of sense for it to orient your attention towards the source of the threat.
True.
Rather than other things in the environment that are currently not so important.
Yeah.
So that would make sense, and I think there's some evidence for it. And one of the things that are being theorized about happiness, there's this theory called broaden and build theory of positive emotions or happiness. That's about how being in a state of happiness or positive emotions allows people to sit back and relax and open up and explore different realities, see new connections between people, between things. Affiliate with others to basically broaden their perspectives and affiliate with others to build and expand their views, which is kind of the opposite of the narrow focus that you would have with fear, for example.
With fear. So it might actually not be so bad if we're in a, let's say, high pressure situation and you do feel a little bit of discomfort or fear, that it might put you in this kind of tunnel vision to maybe get to a problem case. So we should also not ultimately think about being a bit anxious or stressed in a workplace situation as something completely undesirable, I would say.
I agree. And I think it's almost inevitable. I mean, some people may be super great at regulating their emotions, but I think many people, if they have to perform, do something, shoot a penalty or give a speech or do a job talk or whatever, they will feel nervous and anxious, and they will often say, well, I didn't particularly like that feeling, but it did get me to focus. And if you, imagine if you would go do something super important for your career and you would feel entirely relaxed, would you be as well prepared?
Good point.
I doubt it.
I doubt it as well. But then for maybe a brainstorming session to get a lot of creative ideas done, it might not be the worst to be in a quite happy,
exactly,
relaxed
totally. So and
place.
So it's all about really. I think emotions should respond in functional ways to situational demands, and there's lots of ways that this can go well. Yeah. And then pretty much every emotion can be functional depending on the situation, but it can also go terribly wrong. If people don't regulate this well, or they feel or show the wrong emotions in a certain situation.
Yeah, that makes sense. Now, I'm also interested, you also did some research in the field of leadership and emotions. What would you say when is, or what kind of leaders are we most prone to, and why? Is there maybe like an explanation to it?
Yeah, I know there's work on, back to emotional intelligence, showing that when it comes to selecting leaders in the first place, people have a preference for leaders who seem to be at least somewhat emotionally intelligent.
Okay.
So they might be seen as more empathic, or better listeners, more interested, more likely to take your wishes into consideration, better able to understand your problems and things like that, which are, of course, important qualities for a leader. So there's definitely a pattern there. But then there's also a counteracting force that once people get leadership positions and powerful positions and they have a lot of demands for their time, it becomes less feasible for them to exhibit those qualities. Yeah. Because if you don't have the time, or maybe you have 1,000 subordinates, you can't possibly remember of all 1,000 of them. Were you the one whose dog just died, or were you the one who had a breakup, or fire in the house, or you can't know all of that, even if you're interested. So there's a point where it becomes impossible to show all these qualities. And it's the same to some extent for emotional skills. If there's a lot of demands on your time, it becomes less possible to read and spend a lot of time on other people's emotions. Yeah. And there's also a motivational element to it. When people feel a lot of power and autonomy and independence, they don't rely on others. They don't need others to as much to attain their own goals. Okay. And that's when they start to process information about others less, including emotional information.
Oh, interesting, because they rely more on themselves, or it's maybe not as important for them to read the signals of others.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay. So it also depends on, of course, the person, then what effect it has on us. But would you say is it still a phenomenon that, it's not a secret, I think, that narcissism is also happening in higher positions. And why is it that we sometimes feel so prone to narcissistic leaders, or leaders who show maybe a bit this toughness?
I think so. Narcissism is not my primary topic of expertise, but I do know that there's evidence that narcissists can be very charismatic, can seem very charismatic and very attractive at first blush, because they're outgoing, they're a bit bolder than others perhaps, so they stand out in the way that they behave, and sometimes this can be attractive to people, especially for leadership kinds of positions. You want somebody who's maybe a little bit more outspoken rather than somebody who doesn't dare to speak up. Yeah. So there's that part. The other part that you mentioned, why do we sometimes vote for or support people who don't behave appropriately, let's say, is a slightly different question, which actually is something I'm studying quite a bit at the moment. Okay. Which is not sort of is less related to emotions, somewhat, but there is a growing evidence that people can find norm violators appealing in situations where they feel that they have something to benefit from them. Which could be the current economy is broken, it doesn't do anything for me, so I will vote for this person who promises to overthrow the system.
Yeah. So
regardless of whether they will actually do that for you, as opposed to for millionaires that happen to be in their close circles, or billionaires. That's a different question, right?
Yeah.
But sometimes people suggest they will. Also, right-wing politicians in the Netherlands have done similar things, right? Suggesting that certain problems that are affecting people, like housing shortage, suggesting that they would solve those problems in unlawful ways. Which typically you would think people should not support unlawful policies, but they will sometimes support those policies if they think, at 32, my son will finally find a house and be able to live by himself, which is also understandable.
So it's kind of like, I understand where you're getting towards, because it's this phenomenon. It's when you feel affected by something, and then these people or politicians in that sense trigger that need. Maybe that psychological or economic need or whatever it is. And then they push some emotional triggers, and they deliberately also make use of emotions, I think.
Absolutely.
Then, of course, they push some buttons. And then that's also where in the voters, in that sense, I think this cognitive shortcuts come in. You don't think about, is this actually going to happen, or what might the consequences be, or whatsoever. It just sounds like good in the moment to you. But it oftentimes is a false promise.
In terms of buttons, I totally agree. So I think they push the fear button. They make you afraid of some outgroup, whether it's foreigners or immigrants or left-wing politicians or the media or whatever. There's typically some outgroup that gets the blame for something that's going wrong in the eyes of some people. And then the other button, I guess, is the anger or aggression button, where people are being rallied to go against the source of the problem. It's set up in such a way that this rallying can almost feel legitimate, because those people are destroying our lives, and therefore it's warranted for us to go against them hard.
Yeah. You're completely right. It's such an interesting topic. I could speak about that forever. But it's also, I'm gonna follow in that sense your current research, because I think it's more prominent than ever, maybe, to touch into this field. But Gerben, I'm also interested. We're in the middle of the winter blues, as some people might call it. Personal question: do you feel affected by the winter blues, the winter times? Does it emotionally
again,
affect you?
This makes me laugh. This is those kinds of things that are just mass hysteria. The media, or the media, as if it's a monolithic thing. But these recurring things like, now we all have to be depressed because it's one of the shorter days in the year, and our New Year's resolutions didn't come through, whatever, weren't fulfilled, and it's dark. Well, actually, it's a pretty nice day. Yesterday was a beautiful day. I feel great. So, I mean, I can imagine that maybe on average, January is a harder month for some people. I can imagine. Definitely, the darkness can get to you. But I don't think I have much to complain.
Yeah, I completely agree. I actually found the winter wonderland that we had recently with a lot of snowfall quite nice, quite refreshing. And I also thought most people enjoyed it. Many went for a walk or building random snowmans in the city. I thought it was quite cute. But I guess it's also, I think I'm a bit both sides. On the one hand, I also feel like it's a bit of a myth, and we shouldn't talk ourselves into it. But on the other side, on a physiological level, it is doing maybe a little bit to us when the days are shorter and darker.
Yeah, there's definitely evidence for that.
Yeah. But as a last advice to our listeners who might be a bit more stuck in the winter blues than both of us are, do you have maybe an advice to get through these shorter, darker, for some sadder days? And especially in the workplace.
I would try what they call reappraisal. So when things look gloomy, try to look at them through a different glass, through different lenses. Try to see the upsides of certain things. Try to not interpret things as bad, or the actions of other people. Try to interpret them not as stemming from ill intentions, but assume that people are all trying to do the good thing. And I think if you change that mindset, you will see a lot more beauty and positivity around you, even in the darkness.
I love that, Gerben. Sometimes a choice also. Yeah, how we approach life and how we see the things. Well, thank you so much, Gerben, for our conversation today. It was super insightful. I would have loved to continue this talk into infinity. But I also want to use this last chance to maybe you can tell us briefly about the books you wrote and what they are called for our listeners in case they want to read a little bit more into what you have done.
Okay, sure, yeah. Yeah, the first one is a Dutch popular science book. So for those of the listeners who speak Dutch, it's called Op het Gevoel. It was published at Atlas Contact. And the other one is science book, which is in English, and that's called The Interpersonal Dynamics of Emotion. And that's more recent and therefore a bit more more extensive. There's more research that went into that, and it's also more thorough because it's an academic book.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much once again for sharing your insights with us today.
Pleasure.
Conversation. Thank you. And we hope to see you more frequently, so please make sure to subscribe to your favorite channel. You can find us under www.brainsfirst.com/podcast. And until next time, stay happy, stay healthy, everyone. See you next time on the NeurOlympics podcast. Ciao, ciao.